Hello, all you artifact looters out there, and welcome to Undeclared Bajor. My name is Fletcher. About to say hello is Data.
What up?
Today we're going to discuss and review Star Trek Deep Space Nine Season 4, Episode 9, The Sword of Kahless. Alternate title, Indiana Wharf in the Caves of Wandering.
Okay.
As always, you can expect full spoilers up through this episode being discussed, and a possible small number of minor spoilers for later in the series, but we will keep those to an appropriate minimum, and, warn you after the fact, so that you have no chance of avoiding them.
Yep.
We'll spoil tons of movies and stuff too, so just watch out.
That's how we do.
That's how we do. The Sword of Kahless originally aired November 20th, 1995.
It's like the Thanksgiving episode.
Ooh. Not very much Thanksgivingness to the episode, but
Nope.
I was trying to think of a connection, but it was written by Hans Beimler, whose name I think I've seen as a producer a bunch, but never a writer.
We saw him do a teleplay before this. He did Paradise along with Jeff King and Richard Manning. That was one of the three people ones, I guess.
And story by Richard Danis.
But after this, he gets pretty prolific on Deep Space Nine with 26 episodes that he gets writing credit on. And it looks like the majority of these are with Ira Stephen Bear, so I guess maybe they're buddies or something. But let's find out a little more about Hans Beimler. Born in Mexico City in the 1950s, son of a Spanish Civil War refugee and an American painter.
Ooh.
Wow. Named after his grandfather, German communist and hero of the Spanish Civil War, Hans Beimler.
Nice.
So yeah, that's some pretty cool history.
Yeah.
He wrote some Next Gen episodes, 10 of them, along with Richard Manning.
So those guys with the German names, they always have the most awesome backstories.
Right. Ira Stephen Bear asked the two of them to join the Deep Space Nine writing staff after they did the teleplay for Paradise. Beimler turned him down at the time, but would later join the team a year later, beginning with the 4th season. So he's on the team now. Nice.
How about Richard Danis? Or do we have more awesome Hans Beimler stuff?
Well, he's got some interesting bits in here where it's like he worked with his friend and fellow Deep Space Nine writing staff member Robert Hewitt Wolf on the television series The Dresden Files, which you and I watched the first episode of, and it was not good.
Uh-huh.
He'll later appear in an episode as like a random background actor.
Was there more than one episode of the Dresden Files TV show?
Oh yeah, I don't know how many actually aired, but I do know that like when the season was available for streaming, there's like 13 episodes or something. We watched the first one that aired, and it was so ridiculous that I don't think either of us watched anymore. The books, however, are great. I love the books. People should read those. Oh, here it is. He produced, wrote, and directed several episodes of William Shatner's Tech War television series.
Nice.
So, yeah. He's out there. Okay, so Richard Danis. Is that the other person we're talking about?
Yep.
He has credits on 3 episodes of Next Generation. It's 2 episodes, I guess. He's the writer of Deja Q and did the teleplay for Booby Trap along with 2 other people. And this is one of the 2 Deep Space Nine credits he has, where he did the teleplay for Battle Lines and then the story for this one. I like most of his article on here is very small, but it's mostly this Ira Stephen Bear quote where he goes, "So then I go to a guy I don't even know, this guy Richard Danis, who's literally a dead man walking. The first thing he says to me is, I'm on a 10-week contract. They're not picking up my contract. I'm gone in like 2 weeks. I've never met Rick Berman. I've never met Gene Roddenberry. Don't talk to me. I'm dead."
Nice. So he's just a guy who was around,
I guess,
for a little bit.
I like, outside of Star Trek, he is also known for the Chris Christopherson vehicle, No Place to Hide. I don't know that, so I don't know him for that.
I've never heard of that, so.
No. But yeah, he doesn't, his IMDb is very limited other than Star Trek and No Place to Hide. Let's see. He wrote 3 episodes of Serpico. And that's the most interesting thing on here.
Huh. All right. And directed by LeVar Burton.
Yeah, he's done some stuff before.
Yeah, I think I've heard of that guy.
Yeah.
I guess he's He's just right back after... Which one did he... he directed Indiscretion, right?
That sounds right.
So he's just right back into it.
Yep. Maybe he's just going to be like one of the regular directors this season, and they're just throwing him some work.
It's like he just showed up. He's like, all right, put me to work. He's like, can Jordy be on the show too? And they're like, no. He's like,
nope.
Well, can I have some kind of work? But anyway, in this episode, Kor, Dahar Master, sits and quirks, telling an epic tale of glorious battle among rivers of lava. The tales are among rivers of lava. He's not sitting
in quirks in rivers of lava, no. Yeah.
But he's the crowd is captivated, and Worf listens surreptitiously from the bar. But then he's rudely interrupted by Quark, who's like, oh, I hate Klingon stories.
Yeah, why do you... I don't know why Quark thinks this is the audience for this rant, but whatever.
Maybe just because he sees Quark just sitting by himself at the bar. He's like, oh, he must not like Klingon stories either. He's Klingon, but that doesn't mean he has to like Klingon stories.
I guess that's true.
But I love the look that Worf gets on his face when Quark comes up to him. It's just like, oh my god, this guy.
Why is this guy talking to me? Well, because you're in his place of business, okay?
When the story is over, Dax arranges an introduction.
I love the bit where it's like, I don't believe it. Like, the whole senior staff basically is like, do you believe any of this crap? This is so ridiculous. And then O'Brien's like, but he tells it so well.
It's like, well, if you think the story's so dumb, why are you listening?
Exactly. I like that O'Brien is a man who can appreciate a well-told tale.
Yeah, absolutely. Kor is happy to meet Worf, enemy of Gowron. So I guess Kor just is not a Gowron fan.
Well, because he doesn't have a statue. It's probably Gowron's fault. I don't know.
Oh. Kor teases an epic quest he's about to undertake for an ancient artifact.
And Dax is like, shut up.
Even better than the Torch of Gabak.
Yep.
So this is got to be some artifact better than the Torch of Gabak.
What are the other things that it's cooler than? He goes on for a whole minute.
It was like somebody's armor and like the Emperor's crown or something like that.
Yeah.
Worf immediately guesses it's the Sword of Kahless.
Apparently, it's well known that if it's more legendary than the Torch of Gabak and the armor and stuff, then it's the only thing that it could be, really.
It's like if you were to do a tier rating of all the most coveted artifacts.
Yeah.
It's like there's not much up there above the Torch of Gabak. But Worf immediately asks to come along. In fact, he just assumes he's going to get to come along.
Yeah, he's like, man, we're going to be so great. And they're like, wait, who? Yeah. Who said you could go?
But he gets invited along because that would annoy Gowron. Then Kor pulls out a piece of cloth that supposedly held the sword and asks Dax to examine it for authenticity. But she's too drunk, so she doesn't right now.
Yep.
She's like, I'll do that tomorrow. I have to go sleep off this blood wine. So we cut to later. A drunken Kor opens the door to his quarters. When all of a sudden, lightning hands, motherfucker. That's right. Never thought I'd see more lightning hands, but there we go.
The return of the Lethian mind attack, although this one is also not fatal, so I don't know.
This one seems specifically designed to just steal knowledge, which I didn't know the Lethian could do that, but...
Well, wasn't that what he was... No, maybe that wasn't what he was trying to do with Bashir. He was
just trying to kill him.
Yeah.
Later, Dax finds Kor on the floor and assumes he was just so drunk he couldn't find his bed.
Kor assumes that also, to be fair.
Yeah. But she has good news. The shroud is legit. Good thing Worf wasn't premature breaking out that Uridian brandy last night.
Right?
Yeah, I love how Worf looks at the cloth. He's like, oh, that's real.
Okay, for sure. 100%. And Dax is like, do you know how many fake shrouds of the sword there are? These are all over the place.
I just love how many times Worf and Kor are just so into the sword throughout this episode. They're like, oh my god, the sword is so glorious. How can it be fake?
I was looking up Lethians, and in the Apocrypha section, it's like, Lethians figure prominently in the PC game Klingon Honor Guard as one of the more formidable adversaries faced by the player in their role of an Honor Guard trainee. So, I've never heard of this game Klingon Honor Guard, but that sounds cool.
Huh. I mean,
And
those lightning hand attacks, they're no joke.
yeah, they use their telepathic abilities, which are illustrated during gameplay by sparks of lightning.
Sure.
And then in Star Trek Online, Lethians are a playable race in service to the Klingon Empire.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Huh.
They have access to a unique trait called Rapture, whereby they deal psionic damage over time with a chance to stun their target.
Huh. Dax and Worf pay a visit to Sisko during his morning shaving routine.
Oh yeah, there's a whole thing about this razor. So, the razor it says it looks exactly like the one that Geordi uses to shave in an episode of The Next Generation. And then it goes on to say, according to Michael and Denise Okuda, it is in fact the same prop from Code of Honor, which that's a very early Next Generation episode to have this prop just laying around since then.
I guess they're just like, do we have any razors in the prop department? And they look on the catalog or whatever. They're like, oh, apparently we do. But yes, while Sisko shaves, Dax and Worf relay Kor's story of the Shroud. So apparently some Vulcans found it in the Gamma Quadrant and gave it as a gift to Kor, not knowing what it was.
So they're like, hey, have this cloth as a token of our esteem.
So let's track this story. So some Vulcans were in the Gamma Quadrant mining.
Yep.
And they were like, hey, look at this cloth. Let's take it home.
Well, according to later on, they're like investigating this planet, and they find that force field thing, and they can't get past it.
Okay.
So I guess sitting around outside the force field, they find a cloth, and they're like, let's take this. Maybe it's of some archaeological interest. And then instead of doing that, they're like, hey, random Klingon guy, here you go.
Right. Yeah, they're like, apparently he was the ambassador to Vulcan, right?
Oh, is that what he said? Yeah, okay, that
I think
makes sense.
they said Kor was the ambassador to Vulcan. And so they were like, hey, ambassador, check out this cloth we found in the Gamma Quadrant. And he's like, oh, interesting. I mean, it's not worth much, but, I could take it off your hands if you want.
See, knowing Kor, I imagined it like the ambassador to Vulcan is getting wasted every night, and they're like, oh god, how are we going to get him to stop drinking so he doesn't embarrass us all again? Hey, look at this cool piece of cloth we found. Yeah. Isn't this interesting? Stop drinking for a minute.
Yeah, some guy just happened to have the cloth on him.
Yeah.
He's like, But history tells us that over 1,000 years ago, the Klingon homeworld suffered an alien invasion by some guys called the Herc, which apparently means outsiders. So basically it just means aliens.
They didn't know who they were, so they just called them the Herc.
Right. They're just some guys who came down, stole a bunch of artifacts, then left. Or something. They were like, whoa, what was that? But yeah, they stole the sword and they ran off.
Apparently the Herc show up in a lot of other Star Trek media, since I guess they're this mysterious group that you can use for various things. They show up in different games and books and stuff. I
mean, it is kind of an interesting mystery. Like, who are these guys? How did they come from all the way from the Gamma Quadrant to Kronos 1,400 years ago? I guess they were just using that wormhole way back then.
I think in at least, if I'm remembering right, in at least one of the apocryphal bits of media, they are using Iconian gateways or something.
Huh. All right. But Sisko grants the use of a runabout for the sword search, as it may help patch relations with Klingons if Starfleet officers find the sword. So he's like, hey, be friends with us. We found your cool sword. Or something. And then so they get on the runabout. Kor gives a little quest commencement speech.
Yep.
He's like, here we go on this awesome quest. And then they're off through the wormhole. And then Kor does this cool hand gesture to open the wormhole or whatever.
Open sesame. Originally, in the script, it was the USS Mekong. But the Mekong was presumed destroyed in the Dias cast, so they changed it to the real name.
They forgot. They didn't have that table.
So apparently, according to this is actually the first episode of the 4th season that did not have the script greenlit or the story greenlit prior to the decision to bring Michael Dorn onto the show. So other than Way of the Warrior, which obviously, if you remember that we talked about how they had to make some changes and stuff at the last minute to for the story that they were going to use there. But all these other stories that we've had so far were already approved before they hired Michael Dorn to be on this show. So that's why he gets like squeezed into like B stories in those previous episodes. But now they're like, okay, we're gonna have Worf. We want to put Worf like front and center in an episode, and so that is how we end up with this one. And I guess that's also why they didn't know about, because I guess like these stories are getting written before the last season aired. I don't know how that works, but I mean, obviously they weren't getting written after the first episode of this season aired, or else everyone would have known that Michael Dorn was there. So also there's obviously you have the Indiana Jones thing where there's a note here that says this episode may be the closest to Indiana Jones the Star Trek franchise will ever get, with the search for the Sword of Kahless being similar to that of the search for the Holy Grail in Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade. Indeed, of this episode, director LeVar Burton says, it's the search for the Holy Grail, and it's about how the importance placed on the end of a quest, or on the object, affects who we are. The truth is that life's not about the destination, it's about the journey. But, so, while that's clearly here to some extent, there's also a lot of talk about how this is basically the treasure of the Sierra Madre.
Is that the episode that the movie that the Simpsons episode 3 Men in a Comic Book is also based on?
I want to say yes, but I don't remember for sure.
Because the whole time I was just like, this is 3 Men in a Comic Book.
I guess it kind of is, now that you mention it. Hold on. 3 Men.
I was like, they must both be inspired by the same thing. I assumed that Ira Stephen Bear or something saw whatever on TV.
Yeah, probably, right.
And then wanted to do an episode like it.
Okay, so what do we got here? I'm looking at the cultural the accusation and suspicion that grows between the boys is similar to the plot of The Treasure of the Sierra Madre.
Okay.
So, yeah, okay. Although, as with any episode of The Simpsons, the cultural references section about this episode is ridiculous. It's like, there's just a million references.
Sure. I assume it was intentional on the part of the Simpsons writers.
Homer replies, $100 for a comic book? Who drew it? Michelangelo? This is a reference to the Italian painter and sculptor Michelangelo, whose name Homer cannot pronounce.
Oh, I've never understood that joke before. I was like, is that about the Ninja Turtle?
Yeah, obviously. If a Ninja Turtle drew a comic book, I would be interested in it.
Like, my favorite joke from that episode that I remember is just when Marge is like, would you check on the boys? And Homer's watching TV. And, like, there's this epic fight to the death going on outside in the treehouse. And he's like, they're fine.
Yep.
Anyway, this episode.
Yeah.
You were saying something about Treasure of the Sierra Madre? Or
So, yeah. I mean, basically, it's just like, also, this episode is a lot like Treasure of the Sierra Madre.
Sure.
And there's even an Ira Stephen Bear bit in here where he's like, the Sword of Kahless was an interesting show to conceive. I thought it was a good Worf show, with the idea of taking Worf to that place where he crosses the line. The Treasure of the Sierra Madre. That's apparently one sentence. I guess he's saying it goes to that place like this movie did.
Sure.
The goal consumes you so that it wraps your mind up and you can't shake free of it. I thought it was a lot of fun, and I thought it worked well. I thought the acting was nice. John Colicos was terrific. Michael was wonderful. I think the episode suffered a little bit production-wise. Those caves got a little boring, and the action scene at the end was okay, but it could have been better. Recently, I've been reading a lot of things that said we didn't use Worf enough, but I thought that the shows that we did use Worf in were all interesting shows, and were definitely interesting takes on and interesting riffs on that character.
Sure. I mean, yeah, it's totally in character for Worf to go totally insane for a sword.
Try to kill some guy by like,
Right.
yeah, there's a ledge there. You should drop on it.
Yeah, this is totally consistent with me knowing this character for 7 seasons. Okay, so along the way, Kor has an awesome dream of, like, taking the sword back to the Hall of Heroes, and then Kang and Koloth come back to life through their statues, and everybody's... Which I forgot that Koloth also died in that episode.
Yeah, no, Kor was the only of the 3 Klingons that lived.
Because I was like, wait, where's... I was like, Kang died, but Koloth died too?
Yep.
Been a while since we watched that. Eventually they find the planet where the shroud came from, which I guess is the Herc home world or something.
Or something, right, yeah. Who knows?
I mean, their, like, main museum is down there, so...
Yeah.
You'd assume. That's generally how this stuff works.
Or maybe it was like the king's treasure room. Who knows what it was, really?
Yeah. They said it was a museum, but yeah, who knows? They quickly find the ruins of whatever that was, the museum or whatever, surrounded by a force field deep underground.
The museum of shit we stole from other planets randomly.
Right. So basically, the museum.
Yeah, the thing is, I don't know how much history of any of these items they would know, having just shown up on a planet, pillaged it, and left with their stuff.
Right.
So it's like, why is the Sword of Kahless, for example, impressive to them? They're like, hey, we took this thing. It was in it was on a really nice stand in the center of that place, so it's probably important.
Yeah, it was like, I just imagine all their like little signs on their museum exhibits are just like, we went to this planet of some wrinkly head people, and they really put up a fight for this sword, so it must be worth something. Following well-established Starfleet protocol, they all beam down together, leaving nobody back in the runabout.
Yep.
Which, I mean, I'd complain about it, but this is clearly just how they do things, so...
Right, I almost said, like, one of these days that's gonna bite them in the ass, but it has a million times already.
Right.
We always talk about it, because it's always a problem.
Dax makes short work of the force field, and they enter the museum to find it looted, and no sword in sight.
Those Vulcans were dumb. They couldn't even do the force field.
She pushes 3 buttons and is like, okay, force field down.
Yep.
Worf begins investigating to find out who took the sword so they can chase them down. And I'm like, oh man, this is going to be epic. They're going to chase this sword all across the galaxy.
It's going to be like that episode of The Next Generation, The Chase.
Oh yeah. So, man, which is another very Indiana Jones-like episode.
Yeah, it kind of is.
But then Worf finds a strange wall. They deduce it's another force field, but it's like a fake force field wall, guarded by a sensor that will only let the Herc in for some reason.
Yeah. So yeah, any Herc could have strolled in here and opened it up and taken out the one object that they apparently considered so cool they hid it.
Yep. To be in that room when the Herc were coming up with this stuff. This is another very Indiana Jones thing, though, where it's like, who built this temple? Like, what is the purpose of all this crap? Dax spooks some Herc life signs with her tricorder, or spoofs.
Yep.
And they're in. And behold, there's a Batleth in there. Everybody's excited. And this is where Worf and Core are like, oh my god, just look at how awesome that sword looks. It's gotta be the Sword of Kahless.
Yeah, how could it not be?
But on their way back out, they run into a bunch of Klingons and that Lethian guy.
Yep.
Aha, says Toral of the House of Duras. Remember me, one of the people you drunkenly told about the sword? Give that to me, since having that sword will immediately make me ruler of all the Klingons. Yeah, sure, here, says Worf. Psych! They easily beat up the Klingons, although Worf gets stabbed, and they get away, closing the force field behind them.
Suck it, losers!
Yep. Thus begins what I call the cave wandering section of the episode.
So apparently, in the original draft of the teleplay, the scenes in the caves were a lot more elaborate.
Uh-huh.
They involved a running battle with Toral's forces, booby traps exploding, floors falling, arrows shooting out from the walls.
Ooh, that would have been cool.
Like it says, these scenes were no doubt inspired by the opening sequence of Raiders of the Lost Ark. But early in the pre-production process, Steve Auster made the decision to cut all that. Not for budgetary reasons, but for time considerations. To set up and execute all of Beimler's gags, Auster estimated, would have added an entire day onto the shooting schedule, and that was something that they simply could not allow to happen at that time.
Well, I mean, they got me all hyped up for this chase across the galaxy to find the sword, and then we stumble into these caves. I'm just saying, I got a little... it was a little bit of a letdown, but...
What if they chased down this, like, ancient civilization who came and robbed the Herc, and they, like, tracked them back to their home planet, and they're like, give us the sword! And they're like, what are you talking about? We don't have a sword! and then they have to come back here and find it.
Yeah, it was still back in that room.
Yeah.
That would have been funny. As they stumble through the caves, unable to beam out because of a jamming signal or something, Worf recounts the events of Redemption, which is good because I forgot. This causes Core to get angry and blame Worf for their situation. It's like, you should have killed that kid. I mean, you should have predicted he would have that I would have later bragged to him about the sword, and then he would come here and try to get the jump on us and take the sword.
Yeah, this is so 100% Core's fault. I'm sorry.
Yeah, but Worf gets mad and says basically that. It's like, no, you shouldn't have blabbed about the sword all over the place. And then Core gets all like shifty-eyed, and she's like, how well do you know this Worf guy? We should have left him behind. So apparently they wander around for so long that they have to shoot and eat a cave rat.
That rat was all bones. I need another one.
It was like Worf said some weird thing about like the hunt builds the appetite. It's like, how much of a hunt was that?
It was a battle with this rat.
It was just like Core pointed at the rat and then Dax shot it. But Core immediately begins planning the embellishments of the story he will tell while he uses the sword to eat rat meat.
Hey, gotta eat your rat meat somehow.
Yeah. This upsets Worf, who thinks the sword needs to be honored, so he grabs the sword and puts it in a place of honor against a rock. So I'm going to just put the sword right here. This is an honorable spot.
More honorable than rat meat, Stick.
Worf and Core get into an argument about what to do with the sword. Worf wants to give it to the Emperor to use to wrest power away from Gowron. But Core says no, the Emperor sucks. Someone else should use the sword to take control. Maybe some kind of Dahar master or something. I don't know.
We haven't really seen the Emperor since, that Next Generation episode.
Uh-huh.
So it's hard to be sure how correct or incorrect Core is. But, I mean, given how little the Emperor seemed to have affected anything, I tend to maybe agree with Core that that's not going to be super effective.
Yeah, I think even Worf agrees that's a pretty accurate read of the situation. Core goes off to find another rat, and Worf is like, yeah, he's right, the Emperor sucks. Then he tells the story of when he was a kid visiting Kronos, and he ran away into the caves of Nomot, and met the ghost of Kahless, who told him he would do something no Klingon has ever done. At first he thought that meant joining Starfleet, but now he knows he's destined to use the sword to rule the Klingon Empire.
I mean, if the ghost of Kahless was going to tell you were going to do something, I would have thought it was that part where you found the resurrected Kahless and brought him back to the Klingon people. That seems like a bigger thing.
Yeah. I mean, maybe all of the above. Who knows?
Yeah.
And then he's like, when I touched the sword, the ghost of Kahless flowed through me, and I knew I was destined to rule the Empire. I was like, okay, geez.
That is a bold jump that Worf has made.
Yeah. I just love everybody's like, anybody who has this sword will be considered so awesome just by having it that they will immediately become ruler of all the Klingons.
Hey, it's more legendary than the Torch of Gabak. I don't know what to tell you.
I mean, we'd do that just for the guy who had the Torch of Gabak.
Exactly, yeah.
But, I mean, the Sword of Kahless, no contest.
So, okay, this is a good point to talk about. There's a point in here that this episode was somewhat unpopular with some viewers when it first aired. And Renee Echevarria says, a lot of fan reaction was that there had to be some tech explanation. The sword must be emitting something or doing something that was causing this. I was astonished. The sword itself, it's like people just couldn't accept that the sword itself doesn't have any magic. It's the concept of the sword that has power. We wanted to explore the notion that there was some dark streaks to be revealed within these characters, and the minute anyone starts talking about the sword, it starts infecting them, so Worf gets caught up from the very beginning. Uh-huh. But they were very unhappy that fans seem to have missed this point.
I guess I missed it too, but whatever. I was like, that sword has to have a curse on it or something.
Yeah, according to them, most fans seem to think that the sword had a power and it just wasn't revealed in the episode.
Yeah. I don't know, maybe it's because we saw 7 seasons of Next Generation of Worf, honing his honor and being obsessed with doing the right thing. It just maybe felt a little weird that he suddenly wanted to use an ancient artifact to take over the entire Klingon Empire and rule it.
Yeah, a little bit strange.
It's possible these guys didn't watch The Next Generation? I don't know.
Well, and like Hans Beimler says that, yeah, I saw a lot of discussion on the net about this. It was interesting. People just assumed there was like a virus or something that infected them when they touched the sword.
Or maybe like some of that bad museum air had something.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Apparently Dax was kind of immune, though. She was good.
I mean, one of my notes in here is to keep my sanity, I have to make myself believe the sword had some kind of curse on it or something.
Oh, but there's, speaking of, now that we've discovered the sword in the episode, there's so they had Dan Curry working on the design for the sword. And it says, based upon an illustration by John Eves. Originally, Eves was assigned to design the sword himself, but after making some preliminary drawings, he went to Curry, who was the original designer of the Batleth, and allowed him to finish the project. So I like this idea that John Eves has like been assigned to do this, and he's like, I don't know, is this loyal to the concept of the Batleth? Why don't I go talk to the guy who created the Batleth, and we'll see what he says.
That's some dedication right there. Cool looking sword, I gotta admit.
Yeah.
Props to the prop guy on that one. So they wander around some more and come upon a big chasm. Luckily, there's a narrow ledge they can precariously walk across.
Yeah, I'm sure that'll work out fine.
Kor immediately falls off. Worf is able to grab the sword and hold on to Kor via the sword. Worf is like, just let go of the sword. There's a ledge down there you can fall onto. And then Kor is like, hell no. So Worf just pulls him up.
Yeah, why didn't you do that in the first place, Worf?
Later, the soundness of the supposed ledge is called into serious question.
Yeah. Dax agrees that ledge could not have held Kor, and Worf just tried to murder him. And
right.
She's surprisingly, like, I mean, she's unhappy about it, but she's not that upset about it.
I can't believe fans were so disturbed by Worf's characterization in this episode. So obviously Worf would murder a Klingon Dahar master to steal a sword from him.
Yeah.
Kor tries to pull a knife to get the sword back from Worf, but Dax is like, no, that's enough, and she takes the sword. And I swear, I was like, is Dax about to start having dreams of ruling the Klingon Empire? But apparently that fantasy never comes into her head.
I'll be the first Trill to rule the Klingon Empire.
All will bow before me. Dax. Then they wander around some more and decide they better stop for a rest. Worf and Kor get into the classic who should take the first watch argument. But to put an end to that, Dax just puts a phaser on the sword and falls asleep. So it's just like, if someone tries to steal the sword, I'm just going to blow the sword up.
And then hours later, like, Worf and Kor have just been staring at each other the whole time.
Yeah, so they apparently stare at each other for at least 3 hours and make no noise. And then Worf just has enough. He's like, enough, he's been staring at me.
Mom, he's looking at me. That is the kind of thing that my 4-year-olds say. It's like, he's looking at me. I'm like, he's allowed to look at you. I'm sorry.
Oh, also, I forgot the part where Kor is like, hey, listen to that. It's the ghost of Kahless telling you to cut our throats and steal the sword. Which, I'm not 100% sure that his suspicions are unfounded at this point. So, yep. Dax is awakened by Worf and Kor arguing. They pull weapons on each other, but are interrupted by the Toral gang. So after beating up those guys real fast, Kor and Worf immediately go back to fighting for the sword. Dax has had enough at this point and just shoots both of them.
See, I feel like the real question is, why have they been running this whole time? Wouldn't it have been easier to, like, set an ambush and take these guys out? You beat them pretty handily.
Yeah, that would have been, like, cool and interesting and exciting. But, I don't know, let's just run around and then fall asleep. Why not?
We didn't talk about it earlier, but like after Kor kills the guy with the sword, he's like, "Did you see that guy when I killed him with the sword? He was so honored to be the first death at the hands of the sword in 1,000 years."
He's like, he knew what an honor this was.
Yeah, if you say so, dude.
So then Dax goes up to one of the Klingon guys and just like literally puts a gun against his head and is like, "Turn off the jamming signal."
It's like, okay, man, whatever you say.
And then back aboard the runabout, Kor and Worf agree that the sword is just too awesome for one man and just beam it off into space to be found 1,000 years later or something. The end.
Well, depending on which extra TV or which apocryphal source you go to,
Uh-huh.
The sword gets picked up in several different times, in depending on what novel or game you're looking at. For instance, I don't know if you ever played Star Trek Armada, but that was a game that I was a big fan of. And at some point in there, Worf retrieves the sword so that he can use it to unite the Empire against the forces of Toral, who is trying to take over the Empire.
Again?
Yep, again. This time without the sword, but... And then there's a novel where it's actually a J.G. Hertzler novel. So, like, the guy who plays Martok, I guess, wrote this novel. And it's, in the novel, there is an attempted coup against the leadership. I don't want to spoil anything here. And Dax retrieves the sword to help quell the coup.
Ah.
And then in Star Trek Online, Emperor Kahless gives the players a replica of the sword after recovering the original, and the Emperor uses it to battle the leader of the Iconians and chop off her arm before she kills him.
Oh. I mean, I guess it would make kind of sense for Dax to kind of remember where the sword was.
Right.
I wonder how hard it is to find, like, just a little piece of metal floating in the vast expanse of space.
I assumed that they intentionally, like, put it in a place that they, could know the coordinates of, and that it would stay there in a relatively, like, stable spot, so they could find it again, theoretically.
Seems to go against the spirit of the thing, but maybe.
Okay, so there's one more interesting thing I had to pull out about this episode.
Okay.
There's this long quote from LeVar Burton here where he goes, "Great episode, good Klingon stuff." I think it was the first episode I directed that season that had Michael Dorn in it, so it was great to hook up with him again. That was a lot of fun for me. I thought John Colicos, that's who plays Kor, was terrific too. It was also a show that was memorable for me because we spent so much time in the caves on Stage 17. Of a 7 or 8 day schedule, we had about 4 in the caves. I enjoyed it. I thought that was a good episode.
So LeVar Burton likes shooting in the caves.
And then about Terry Farrell, he goes, "Action Barbie, that's my girl," because she's Action Barbie. She's this incredibly statuesque woman who doesn't mind throwing a kick or a punch or punching you in the groin. She's Action Barbie to me. Which I feel like that's a really pejorative term to have... but...
That's just a really weird way of describing that. It's like, she'll kick you in the groin. She'll do anything.
There's a quote from Terry Farrell about the episode, which is like, that episode was great because it was the first time I did action for LeVar Burton. He didn't expect me to do well at it. When I did, he called me Action Barbie. So Sword of Kahless was my Action Barbie episode, and I've been Action Barbie on the set ever since.
Oh, okay.
So apparently the nickname stuck, and she doesn't sound upset about it.
Some people might get mad about being called Action Barbie.
Yeah.
Like forever, but all right.
Yeah, you do you. I mean, I assume that if she didn't like it, she wouldn't have mentioned it in this interview with Star Trek Deep Space Nine, the official magazine.
Or she would have been like, she's called the Action Barbie joke just went on forever and ever. Nobody would even call me by my name. They just called me Action Barbie after that.
Well, I mean, this is the official magazine must have been coming out during the run of the show, so she wouldn't
maybe
put it down or whatever. Probably. Let's see. This one that she's quoted from, when did this one come out? Let's see. Star Trek Deep Space Nine, the official magazine, 4 bonus stunning posters, volume 18. There is no date on the front of this magazine.
Right. We still gotta get some of those magazines and look at those posters.
Right. Hold on, I gotta figure out when volume 18 was. Okay, yeah, this doesn't say when volume 18 came out either. It just... man, featuring an interview with Howard Weinstein.
Howard Weinstein?
Yeah.
Okay.
Who is that? He became the youngest person to ever write a script for Star Trek, selling the Pirates of Orion for use in Star Trek the Animated Series.
Oh.
Cool.
Good for him.
Yeah. Worf makes a reference to Kor's battle with Kirk on Organia, referring to the original series episode Errand of Mercy, where Kor made his first appearance.
Good callback.
Upon opening the wormhole, Kor remarks that their quest for the sword will be glorious. He says something similar to Kirk towards the end of Errand of Mercy, regarding the possibility of facing the Enterprise captain in war. So he's big on the glorious.
Sure. I mean, what Klingon isn't?
And so the actor who played Kor is quoted, I love this episode. I thought this was a marvelous kind of tour de force, and I loved all the baiting with Worf, the fight that we had together. All of that was quite fun to play. I enjoyed that tremendously. Hans Beimler wrote it specifically for me, and he gave me glorious opportunities. In fact, he put the word glorious in it too, which seems to have gone down in Klingon history.
Nice. So what do we think of this title? Sword of Kahless.
I think this is a perfectly titled episode.
Right. I mean, it's hard to have a better title than literally what the episode is about.
Yep. This is so on target. You can't possibly mistake this episode for a different episode when you hear the title.
Right. It's like Sword of Kahless. Which episode is that?
Yeah. I think that this may be the most perfectly titled episode we've had so far.
Yeah. In a rare, accurate titling of the episode.
Yep.
It's like they didn't try to come up with any clever layered meanings or anything like that.
Although it was funny because I watched the episode the other day, and then today I went to read the stuff in the article so that I would have some talking points in my brain.
Uh-huh.
And I was like, what episode was that? It's the one with the Sword of Kahless. And so I Googled like Sword of Kahless to try to find what the episode was called. And I kept not finding like the episode about the Sword of Kahless. I was like, what? Huh. It took me a minute to realize, oh, all of these articles that just say Sword of Kahless, that's because that's the title of the episode. Okay, right.
Nice. I guess that leads us into episode review.
Yeah, rating. So what do you want to rate this one?
Well, it's tough. So I was really excited at the start. I was enjoying myself for a while. But when that cave section hit, man, and just the fact that not just Worf, but also it felt a little bit weird for Kor also. Just immediately devolving into this weird, suspicious thing. Although I do kind of like the ending of beaming it into space, but also it's kind of dumb.
Yeah.
I think it's a little bit above the line for me, though, still. So I will give it a Lieutenant Commander.
Okay.
I'll be nice. I wished we got the epic quest we were promised, but apparently that would have taken one day too long to shoot.
Yeah, can't have that.
Or like even that thing that you described where, it's basically a chase through the Indiana Jones temple or whatever. Yeah. That would have been fun and cool. Instead of just like wandering through caves and shooting cave rats and stuff.
Oh man, I love this. I'm seeing this for the first time in the Sword of Kahless, the object, not the episode article.
Uh-huh.
Michael Dorn proposed finding that after the Sword of Kahless was beamed into space at the end of the episode, that the real Sword of Kahless was secretly being kept by Worf, and that he'd taken it back to his quarters.
I just find that concept hilarious.
Yeah,
that Michael Dorn. So in his mind, just everything that says just is hilarious to me. So in his mind, like he is that devious.
Yep. Worf takes it back and he's like, "My precious."
Yeah. He's basically like Gollum of the sword.
Yeah.
And I guess just he's like what's that movie where the guy steals the painting and then just hangs it above his bathtub to admire while he takes a bath?
Is that the
Thomas Crown Affair?
I was about to say, I don't think that's where he puts it in the Thomas Crown Affair, but that is about a guy stealing a painting. Does he put it above his bath? It's been a while since I've seen that.
I thought he put it above his bath. Because
Maybe.
I thought the last shot was basically just that same twist where he's just sitting in his bath looking at that painting. Or maybe it's a shot later or earlier in the movie. I forget all the stuff that happens in that movie.
It's a good movie. I like it. I don't remember the details that well. I feel like the ending of that movie is that like after returning the painting, he used the chaos to steal a different painting.
Okay, maybe.
Anyway, sorry.
Possible spoilers for that movie?
Yeah.
I'm talking about the Pierce Brosnan Thomas.
Yeah, the Pierce Brosnan Thomas Crown Affair, yeah. Because he it's like there's a painting in that same gallery that Rene Russo's character likes the best, and he like steals it and gives it to her or something.
Oh, yeah, that rings a bell.
Also, that's the weird movie where with the super intense, like fully nude scene between Rene Russo and Pierce Brosnan, which is just it's a weird.
Forgot about that. I need to rewatch this movie.
But yes, I like it. I have it on DVD. Anyway, back to the episode that we're talking about.
Right. Oh yeah. Well, how would you rate The Sword of Kahless, the episode?
Core is fun.
Sure.
Again, even when he's being mean and insulting Worf, he's amusing. I agree that Worf, it seems real out of character for Worf, like almost everything in this episode. Even before they find they go on the quest, when he's just like, I'm going to sit in the corner and listen to the story, but pretend I'm not listening to the story. And then I'm going to try to not meet the guy because I don't want it to be awkward for him. I'm just like, none of this really feels all that Worf-like to me, but whatever.
Yeah.
It's all Dax getting to do Klingon stuff has been fun in the past, and I think continues to be fun. Where she's not in the least intimidated by either of these guys, and she's just like, both you shut the hell up.
Yeah.
Toral feels very weak as an antagonist here, and like they're so unimpressive that it's just like, once again, I'm like, why were you running away from them for so long? Like, there's no reason for it.
Yeah, why didn't you just shoot them when they were laying down there on the ground the first time?
Yeah, and in addition to that, the like suspension of disbelief that you have to make, where it's like, yeah, we can't go back to the runabout, so we just have to wander underground for a long time until we get away from the jamming or whatever it is. It's just like, okay, that's a conceit that I guess I'll make, but but I like the story of The Sword of Kahless.
Sure.
I think it's a clever little bit, actually, where Worf spots the force field, and it really like puts the lie to Core later on when he's like, you better hope that I exaggerate, or they'll be like, when they sing this song, it'll be like, and Worf came along. I'm like, dude, you would have left in disgrace if Worf hadn't been here to be like, hey, wait, look at this, instead of whining.
Yeah, that's true.
So, overall, I have a vaguely positive feel about this episode. It's not going to be my favorite or anything, but I think it's got some fun in it, and I enjoy it well enough. So I'm also going to give it a Lieutenant Commander.
Sure. All right. Yeah, I mean, it would have been maybe more interesting if instead of wandering around in caves the whole time, they maybe like there was a jungle up there or something.
Oh, sure.
Just
and
something
then they could have like set booby traps in the jungle, like one of those kind of like predator things,
right? Or just at least some kind of environment that has some kind of visual interest.
Yeah. But LeVar Burton likes the cave set.
Apparently, I didn't know, and I didn't realize that these caves were so beloved.
Also, I have to say that, do you remember the Next Generation episode that tells us how the first ever Batleth was formed by Kahless, which I assume is supposed to be this sword?
No.
So, according to Klingon mythology, Kahless takes a lock of his own hair and puts it in a river of lava, and then cools it in a lake and forges it into a blade.
Okay, so he took a strand of his own hair.
Well, a lock. So, it could have been a bunch of his hair.
Okay. And he put it into some lava?
Yeah.
Was his hair made out of metal?
I don't know.
And then he took it and put it in a lake?
Yeah, to cool it down.
Okay. So the sword is made out of his hair?
Yeah.
Okay.
And molten rock from the lava. I don't know.
Apparently there's just tons of surface lava on Kronos.
Yeah, right? Like, they're always talking about this lava.
Yeah. Yeah, interesting story. I mean, it appears to be made out of some kind of Damascus steel, but...
Well, in actuality, the prop is aluminum that they've made to look like Damascus steel.
Oh, okay. I mean, it did look a little bit light sometimes when they were handling it, but...
Yeah.
You want a sword to be light, though.
Sure. Yeah, light and tough.
And flexible, and not brittle.
The Sword of Kahless was like a Baroque version of a Batleth, where it had different surfaces so that it would be easier to grapple, and the central disembowelment fringe. I'm glad that they have a good name for that central fringe.
It's like, that's just for the disemboweling.
So yeah, the art department guy, Joe Longo, started with the illustrations and ordered a new bat'leth constructed from hardened aluminum, featuring a leather-wrapped handle. And then the prop was given to a sculptor, Dragon Dronet, and he etched designs into the blade using a handheld dental bit. The producers wanted the aluminum to look old and quite similar to Damascus steel, so he chose to make the pattern seem like a mix of Damascus steel and a topographical map, wanting to make it look as if the blade showed mountains as viewed from above.
Ooh.
He then wrote Klingon names down the side of the blade.
Ooh. I gotta say, like, when I was watching that episode, I was like, that's a cool looking prop.
Yeah.
I wondered who has it. Like, if I was ever going to collect collectibles from Star Trek, that might be on my list.
Right. He even talks about the stand. He says, I made the stand out of 1-inch thick plexiglass and engraved the pattern into it. He lastly sprayed the stand, making it appear metallic, and carved its legs to make them look like the feet of Targs, a finishing touch which he thought was funny.
Oh, wow, cool. So the Herc stole the stand also?
I guess so, yeah. Or the Herc also like Targs. I don't know.
It's like, oh, this is the planet where those pig dog things were.
Like, they took a bunch of them home, too, and they became, like, the most popular pet on Herc World.
Herkia Prime.
Yeah.
Yeah. I guess we can wrap it up there, then. Cool episode, in concept, anyway.
Right, yeah. I mean, you're not wrong. The execution could have been a little bit better.
I mean, just if you promise me an epic quest, I want an epic quest.
Do you ever not want an epic quest?
What's on the next episode of Star Trek Deep Space Nine?
Oh yeah, tune in next time for Star Trek James Bond, but kind of dumb.
Ooh.
Yeah.
How enticing. But anyway, if you made it this far, thank you for listening. Don't forget to check the description. Maybe something interesting in there. Like, last time I found, like, that whole Hangar 18 movie.
Right?
Which is right there on YouTube. You can click there. But I'm Fletcher, about to say goodbye as Data.
Bye.
Until we meet again, keep the blood wine warm and the prune juice chilled.